last time out at the Algarve International Circuit. With 35 points clear is Bezzecchi of fellow Italian Pecco Bagnaia, so it looks like, to all intents and purposes, third place in the World Championship for the second time in 3 years. It's covered off for Bezzecchi. Of course, it's been a dominant season for both Marquez and Alex Marquez. 3 points separating Pecco Bagnaia and Pedro Acosta, potentially in that battle for fourth place overall. Matt Burton, Lewis still be in the commentary box as always with you for this season finale. Jack Appleyard down in pit lane. And it's great to see. How many times have we said this season? Another injury comeback beckoning. And for the final time, carrying the number 1 place, his factory Aprilia rider Jorge Martin back in action since turn 1 of the Japanese Grand Prix sprint.
And he said that the motivation to be here in front of a home crowd in Valencia, a sellout crowd on Sunday, was a large part of him wanting to come back this weekend. There were thoughts of potentially waiting until next season to make his return to action, but he really wanted to be here to experience this Valencia Grand Prix with the number 1. His welcome back in is a double long lap penalty. We're about to see the reasons why. It feels an age ago, doesn't it? 4th injury interruption to Jorge Martin 2025. It includes what happened before the first Grand Prix of the season in Buriram, piling into his teammate Marco Bezzecchi. Jorge Martin said yesterday when I spoke to him, he knew this penalty was coming. Absolutely no arguments from his side, and he does say that actually releases a little bit of the pressure off him this weekend. He doesn't have to worry about results, just think about laps, 2 of which will be through the long lap penalty on Sunday.
He knew the long lap was coming. He said straight away, look at that, immediately he goes for that right shoulder. Nobody knows his body more than Jorge Martin. He straight away knew the collarbone was broken. What he didn't realise was just how serious that right shoulder injury was. That muscle and ligament damage. Initially, I think Martin said to the media yesterday he was hoping to maybe just miss a couple of rounds, be back in the Australian Grand Prix in Phillip Island. Actually, though, that appears to be, given the extent of that right shoulder injury, something of a miracle that Martin is actually lining up on the grid here this weekend. And mission number 1, build some confidence, make sure he's not off the factory Aprilia until the tank next February. But Tuesday is a very important day for Jorge Martin in that confidence rebuilding process. As well, while he has been away, Marco Bezzecchi has enjoyed his playtime for Aprilia. Podiums for fun in sprints and Grand Prix with late Bezzecchi, and as mentioned, that has pretty much secured him 3rd place in the World Championship. After a 3rd place in the sprint last weekend from pole position, we thought Pedro Acosta and Marquez might give another run for his money in the Sunday Grand Prix, but never saw which way he went, Lewis.
He ran away and hit at the front of the field. Step forward that we kind of had a little bit of a warning shot of in the warm-up on Sunday morning when he was half second through the field, but I don't think anybody still realised just how dominant he was going to be in the Grand Prix until it began to unfold. And once Alex Marquez was in 2nd place, we all expected him to gradually chip away and have a real go at Marco Bezzecchi. That never really materialised. Not all Martin though, just returning to action. We also welcome back Maverick Vinales, the Tech3 KTM rider, twice a former pole sitter here at the Valencia Grand Prix. Because the last time MotoGP came here back in 2023 when he was on board the Aprilia, he makes his return, of course, after his injury layoff, which really extends all the way back to Saxony. Of course, didn't make a brief return since then, but the shoulder injury is sustained back in July, and that wet qualifying session has impacted the entirety of Vinales' season since then.
He has missed 8 Grand Prix so far this year, has his 30-year-old Spaniard, including the last 4. Amazing, really, having never missed a single Grand Prix through injury in his entire career, Maverick Vinales. Good to have him back with us. While we're just covering up a little bit of housekeeping, well, we've touched upon the returning Martin and the returning Vinales. We do have a bit of an increased grid here this weekend as some of the manufacturers taking advantage of the option for wildcards to get some development mileage on their future packages. Also, Fernandez is back for another play on the Yamaha V4 powered Whitestar M1, and also Alicia Spargaro is also back with us on the official factory Honda with one eye on 2026 as well. Let's go down to pit lane. So good morning to Jack for the very first time of this season. How are you doing, buddy?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Great to be here in Valencia. Can you believe round 22 of 22 and already down pit lane? There was a little bit of an eye towards that last test coming on Tuesday, which of course is live and exclusive on MotoGP.com. Alex Marquez did say yesterday to keep an eye on his garage because there was going to be something in there for him to try, and it is in fact the 2025 Aero package. Now, of course, that Aero package was tried and then put away by Keto Bagnaia, was tried and then put away by Fabio Di Gianantonio. Marc Marquez, however, has continued to use it throughout the season with Nicolo Buliga now using it as well, so it will be interesting. He's got out on it on the moment, he's got out on his standard GT24 machine with the GT24 Aero package, but will be interesting in this session for Alex to get some mileage under his belt on the 25 Aero, which we imagine is going to be the concept that they use for the GT26 when they roll it out on Tuesday, and just start that adaptation process, that big jump from 24 to 2026, when he of course becomes an official Ducati rider on Tuesday.
Good spot, thanks so much. As always, Jackie, Alex Marquez does get the big promotion, the big upgrade next year, staying of course with Graviti Racing, but he will be one of the 4 riders on the full factory GP26 next season. He'll start his leg, I'm sure, over a prototype new Ducati here possibly on Tuesday. Just to finish off our housekeeping, we've done so much housekeeping, haven't we, throughout 2025. Nicolo Buliga, as we knew, he was called upon to replace Marc Marquez in both Portimao last weekend. Actually did pretty well, picked up a point on his MotoGP debut in his 100th Grand Prix start. Back here this weekend, and of course, I believe he's doing the test on Tuesday as well, so he'll be back on track with his former World Superbike Pro top rank Vance Gaglioglu, who will make his very first public debut on the Pramac Yamaha ahead of 2026. Vance Gaglioglu has been private testing at a rather chilly and cool Moto2 Aragon, I believe, over the last couple of days, where Augusto Fernandez was present. Of course, Augusto wildcard this weekend, and no great surprise, he was lauding the brilliant braking performance, the stopping potential of Vance Gaglioglu, having looked at the Turkish data during that private Aragon test.
Yeah, he'll be here this weekend through the Grand Prix weekend ahead of that public MotoGP debut on Tuesday evening. It will be the first time he's ridden that Yamaha MotoGP machine, and completing the wildcard. The latest Fargo's also here this weekend. So for the factory Honda, Elaine has got a bit of top 7 on a 132.2. Of course, a weekend where Honda could shed some of the concessions that they've been enjoying in 2025. If they score, or the leading Honda rider across Sprint and Grand Prix scores 9 points this weekend, which is the equivalent of either a sprint second place or potentially 7th in the Grand Prix on Sunday, the Honda will go up a level from B to C in concessions, which means that they won't be able to test in between Grand Prix with their race riders, only test riders. They'll lose some of the engine development, engine freedom they have available to them, and also the extra aero upgrade through the season. So plenty to play for Honda. Grant me, when I spoke to him yesterday, he's quite keen to lose those concessions because it'll give him extra time off between Grand Prix.
Clear lately, Honda has been pushing the bounds a little bit on that RT133. The mechanical DNF. When was the last time a Honda rider, a factory Honda rider as well, had mechanicals which will mere out of the sprint and in the Grand Prix? Both were apparently clutch related, I'm reliably informed. Not the same issue, but clearly Honda are experimenting with some clutch updates of late, because Somcat Chantra, of course, also had a clutch issue throughout the Portimao weekend. Luca Marini was a retirement with a clutch issue with the Japanese Grand Prix lately, and also we saw 2 spectacular engine blow-ups, didn't we, for the Hondas, the factory Hondas as well, at the Qualifying Grand Prix in Australia. And again, a couple of spies inside HRC were saying that was nothing to do with high mileage, and the season high mileage on those motors. It was because Honda clearly seems at the moment are just starting to maybe drop their conservative approach. They really are starting to get a bit more aggressive in terms of development. And that can sometimes come at the cost of reliability.
You have to admire it in a way, don't you? Because so often the ethos and the culture, I guess, has been they don't want public failures, because I guess they'll feel it reflects badly on them, but you have to take risks, and this is one man who wants his particular camp to take some more risks, technically and mechanically. Fabio Quartararo on what looks set to be the swan song, the farewell for the inline 4 Yamaha this weekend before the EP4 takes over for next season. Recorded with Mario Meregali yesterday, who was talking their chances down, it's fair to say, in the first part of next season, which they still expect to be spent developing the EP4 before they go to big results in the second half of the season. Those are words which will not particularly ring very well in the ears of Fabio Quartararo.
6 last weekend in Portimao, just his 6th top 6 finish of the year for Quartararo. Yamaha this season have just had 7 top 6 finishes. The 26-year-old has scored 6 of them. He said throughout that Portuguese Grand Prix was a tale of 2025 really. as far as the Frenchman is concerned. All season long, dealing with a lack of grip and a lack of power. He just has to revert into defensive mode. What can Fabio Quartararo do in the 2025 one song? Let's go back down to Jack. There's been a bit of a KTM update. What's going on, Jack?
Yeah, I'm just outside Brad Binder's box. Quite interestingly, his bike hasn't, the second one that's stuck in the box, hasn't got any rear aero on it, which shows that the state that Brad Binder's in at the moment, just trying to test everything they possibly can to try and find some answers and some direction before Tuesday's test. Of course, it was a positive weekend for Brad, and a fifth place finish in Portimao. We managed to ride through the field quite impressively, and an interesting spot in the back of the garage. Danny Pedrosa is in there as usual, but there's also, in orange for the very first time, top brass Razgat Lioglu, former crew chief, of course, helped the search for 3 World Superbike Championships. Phil Harris is in the KTM box ahead of his move into Brad Binder's side of the garage on Tuesday for 2026, with Enea Bastianini confirming to me in Portimao that it will be Andres Madrid, the man that's been alongside Brad ever since he moved up to MotoGP, moving across on Tuesday for Enea.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jack. Unfortunately, as you were mentioning, Brad Binder, as you can see on your screen live, he's just taking a tumble here as the South African. This is a real common crash, isn't it? As you're decelerating down from 5th gear, you go to the high-speed left-hander of 7, and as soon as you grab the hand on the brake for turn 8, back 3 gears, just down to 90 kilometres an hour for that tight left-hander. Binder, so often we can see in these cool early morning conditions, Binder has been caught out. As Jack mentioned, it was a real strong ride, wasn't it? 5th place over the line in that Portuguese Grand Prix last time out. In the 3rd competition of the season with the rest of the man leading Binder inside the top 6. Jack was saying that at the moment he hasn't in the fight without any rear aero. Well, he was relieved of some of it by Frankie Moore, wasn't he? On lap 1 in Portimao last weekend.
Yeah, despite all that, it didn't slow Brad Binder down too much, did it, in the end? So, yeah, the KTM still experimenting with various upgrades. I don't think they've necessarily been inspired by Frankie Morbidelli's aggression a couple of, or a week or so ago. Jorge Martin then, there's some free run, he's now back in the box. Martin did say, in the build-up to this return to action, he said, if I do feel pain this weekend, I will stop. One thing he has learned through the season, of course, is to his body. Marquez gave him that advice midway through the season when Martin was out following that Qatar Grand Prix crash. The season has been interrupted on so many occasions by so many injuries, and he did say that the injury to his shoulder, as Matt outlined earlier on, way more serious than he thought at the time, but he has continued to put in the hard yards. He's been over at the Red Bull Performance Centre over in Austria to try and help his rehabilitation too. And one thing he really wants is to be able to go off for a Christmas holiday. He's one thing.
Yeah, 2025 has been a write-off really as far as Martin is concerned, at least. While he has been unfortunately watching on the sofa, he's been able to see an Aprilia that's very competitive when he is back to full health. Getting a welcome weekend off, I think, of all the people who were happy to see Maverick Vinales perhaps fit for this Valencia Grand Prix weekend, he was the very busy Paul Espargaro, who has been standing in at Sector KTM and, as always, doing an absolutely phenomenal job. Top 10 in Brno, in Hungary, in Red Bull, in Phillip Island, and last weekend in Portimao. We bumped into Paul in the lift of our hotel in downtown Valencia last weekend. He was just saying, guys, I've had enough of the race. I love racing, but I just need a little bit of a weekend off. And apparently Danny Pedrosa, I think he's been in Aragon as well at that private MotoGP test, putting in some development miles on the 2026 prototype RC16. Positive news, because Paul told us that Danny was so happy, KTM was so happy with the updates that he tested, that Paul no longer required his participation on Tuesday here in the post-race test. He can head home to Andorra immediately after this weekend's action. So yeah, that will bode well as far as Pedro Acosta and Brad Binder are concerned.
Keep close eye on their progress on Tuesday as well. In case you're wondering on Maverick Vinales, if Maverick Vinales at any point does withdraw from this weekend due to the injury that he's just recovered from, now that he's been entered and has competed in the Valencia Grand Prix weekend, there is no obligation for KTM or Tech 3 to replace him. Why Paul Espargaro can sit there safe in the knowledge that his services won't be required this weekend.
Good to see Ralph Fernandez back in action. Of course, we saw him briefly last weekend in that Portuguese Grand Prix before he had a real nasty crash, well, exactly in this session 1 week ago. Damage to his left shoulder and upper arm. He did, of course, try and continue throughout the weekend before he was withdrawn on Saturday morning. They decided, well, it's best just to rather than risk further damage, further aggravation to that left arm injury throughout the Portuguese Grand Prix weekend. Well, call it quits, get him as fit as he possibly can for this weekend's action in Valencia and perhaps more crucially as well. Tony Wright have got one eye on that Tuesday test, haven't they? They throw their legs over some experimental 2026 parts. So Rafa Fernandez back in action and he's carrying a beautiful actually tribute to Helmer here this weekend, dedicating it to the Valencian community. Of course, it is wonderful to be back here for the first time since 2023. Wonderful to be back in this fantastic city. Of course, it is just over a year ago since the devastating floods which cost so many lives here in this part of Mediterranean Spain. We know, of course, the Aspar team was based here. They did so much for the relief effort, raising €300,000. MotoGP itself, of course, this time last year we raced the Solidarity Grand Prix. We raced for Valencia, and there was a big effort, of course, to donate so much of the proceeds from that final Grand Prix in Catalan last year. €1.5 million was donated by MotoGP to the relief effort. So combined, the MotoGP community came together for the Valencian community to contribute almost €2 million to the effort. And of course, we continue to send all that sort of prayers to Valencians, and it's just great to be back in this city and seeing life thanks to getting back to something like normality.
Let's head down to pit lane with Jack, who's with Paolo Bonora with him on the back of an extraordinary victory for Marco Bezzecchi in Portimao last weekend. So a lot of pleased Paolo now sticking to Jack.
Yeah, he is indeed. And of course, pleased to see the return of the number one in the box, Jorge Martin. Although I'm just looking at the finishes that first run, and it seems to me, Paolo, that the injury a little bit more complicated than I think we all thought it was. His dad Angel there having to help him put the gloves on. He's clearly not 100% yet. So what is the plan for the weekend as a result of that?
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, Jack. He's, first of all, we are so happy to see him again in our garage. But to be fully honest, we knew he is not at 100% of his potential. It seems to me that more so it requires more time. At the end, it is the first time that he joined one motorcycle after the injury that he suffered last time. And and he didn't try even a production bike, the RS4, the standard training bike. So it will be not easy for sure, but we are so happy to have him in the garage, and the goal for this weekend is only to get the rhythm with the MotoGP in order to be not ready, but at least quite comfort during the test, because the test of Tuesday will be very hard.
Marco is about to leave over right hand shoulder. I'll just wait for him to jump on board so we can hear you a little bit more clearly, Paolo, because right now Marco is arguably in the best form of anybody on the grid. I know that you guys are superstitious, but it looks like being third in the World Championship for the first time for Aprilia. 3 victories this year for Aprilia, more than any other MotoGP season. It feels like you guys are starting to build a lot of momentum, and it's all heading towards you fighting for the World Championship next year. Do you think the team are ready for that?
What did you say? We are superstitious, no? Superstitious. Yeah, you are fully right. Despite of the joke, we are so happy about the job that we did. All of the team members did a very great job, and we would like to thank also the guys in Noale, in the factory, because they all of them are the season, long season, but the pressure was so high, but we would like to keep this momentum. They would like to thank the energy of Marco that never. Also during the season there was some special moments, great result, in particular in the second part of the season. But don't forget that we suffered a bit during the cycle of but it was the normal way to join another bike, and another team. So it was everything under control. It was inside one plan. At the end of the year, backward, it seems to be that we did in a great way, and we hope that we create the base for the next year. I would like to be very polite to you. I don't want to say everything much more than this, but to be fully honest with you, our goal for the next year is better than this one. If we finish third, the goal only second and third, Paolo, so let's hope that you guys are in that World Championship side. Of course, we've got a round this weekend, so let's finish off with yet more success. Thanks, Paolo. Thanks,
Thanks, Jack. Great, as always, to hear from our pretty boss, Paolo Minora. What a 2025 the Nuwali factory has achieved, as Paolo Minora mentioned. So much great work done behind the scenes that we don't see at the factory in Nuwali. A pretty most successful season in terms of Grand Prix victories. Two events, one for Ralph Fernandez. It's going to be the first time this season looks like, and a fully rider will finish top 3 in the World Championship. With Marco Bezzecchi currently locked and loaded in that third place, 35 points clear of Bagnaia, which is actually amazing. It just shows how good Bez has been in the second half of the season. He was on a sprint podium until round 10 in Assen on the same weekend when he was second in the Grand Prix. There's only been one previous Sunday podium prior to that, so round 10, Bezzecchi done one sprint podium and 2 Grand Prix podiums. And here he is now, third in the World Championship. It's been a sensational second half of the campaign. I think it just took him a little bit of time. New team, new bike, new pressure, new expectations in that factory of Practice. It's certainly not helpless having to shoulder the burden of all the early season development without Jorge Martin. I mean, the second half of the season, as mentioned, it was Jack talking about Paolo Minora. There's no question about it. Bezzecchi looks like if this carries on, it's going to be a right pain in the backside for the Marquez brothers next year.
Yeah, Aprilia might not publicly be saying it, but they've got to be thinking title challenge next season. Of course, we'll never know ultimately how many of these races Marc Marquez could and would have won had he been here fully fit. Ultimately, he wasn't, and that's part of the game in MotoGP, as Aprilia know all too well with Jorge Martin's absences throughout the season. A big step that Aprilia made through this season was their qualifying performance and their ability, or Marco Bezzecchi's ability in particular, to get a qualifying lap out of that Aprilia. Bez on the front row of the grid until the Sachsenring, and that was in a wet qualifying session, of course, you might recall, back in Germany. He's had 6 front rows since then, including 4 pole positions, which has then given him the opportunity and the platform to use the race pace, which I think has been there through much of the season. He's just been putting it into practice from way too far back on the grid in the first half of the year. Now he's qualifying at the road, he's got the pace to stay there.
You can see this new rear tyre graphic being demonstrated to us. First time we're getting a look at this from Pedro Acosta. You can just see the lean angles, you can just see the surface temperature and these particular parts of this Valencia circuit. Interesting, wasn't it? The highest recorded surface temperature on the rear tyre is 160 degrees. The drop down through turn 13, fourth gear, you're going through about 175 miles an hour. It's a classic Valencia shot, isn't it, when we see the riders power sliding the rear tyre. That's going to generate some heat, so it'll be down through 13 as you break that into 40, where we're going to get the biggest surface temperature. You'll see that left-hand side of the tyre start glowing red when Acosta gets into that final corner. You just saw it there, the temperature started to climb as he came through the infield section. And now he's going to start climbing up towards the turn 30. He'll go through 12, about 125 kilometres here at the curve on the inside. And now this is just about tyre management. Well, the toughest corners for tyre wear is where I'm mixing the describe. Look there goes the red glow. And that's where you'll get the highest temperature around this Valencia circuit. 9 left-hand corners here at the Ricardo Tormo track. 5 rights in what is, as mentioned, a pretty compact layout. Just over 4 kilometres in length. A real stadium atmosphere here this weekend. I mean, it doesn't really matter where you sit in this Valencia circuit. You've got a vantage point and pretty much see the whole track.
And what, of course, that does also achieve, as you saw there, is the other side of the tyre, the right-hand side of the tyre, everything's cooled down, which can also cause some problems when you're on the right-hand side of the tyre next, which is through turn 4. Jack, back down to you.
Yeah, just a quick update on the Yamaha V4, of course. Augusto Fernandez, as you mentioned, is back this weekend, the third time that we've seen him in full competition mode. Now, when he was last with us, some of you guys at home might remember that we showed some images of an adjustable piece of carbon on the chassis so that you can adjust the flex and try and find what feels right and try and find a direction with that chassis to be able to move forward. Now, that has gone on both bikes this weekend. It looks as though that the V4 project has found a direction with the chassis. Of course, all of the factory riders will try on Tuesday, but again, quite alarmingly, Jack Miller was saying that even for the test on Tuesday, throughout this weekend, they still won't have dialed up that V4 engine. Jack Miller saying that he believes it's going to be between 80 and 90%. Yamaha still not comfortable firing up to 100%. And he said he doesn't think that we'll see all this V4 until day one of round one in Thailand. Now, obviously, Fabio Quartararo has spoken at length over the past couple of weeks, the past couple of months, about how he needs a bike that can fight for top 5 in every section. Right now, he cannot wait any longer. Get the feeling with Yamaha still trying to piece together the direction of this V4 that we might see some pretty glum faces in the Frenchman side of the box come Tuesday. We, of course, hope not, but all of the indications is Jack Miller trying his very best to play down expectations in terms of lap times on Tuesday. It could well be the case that Quartararo might not be best pleased with the bike that Yamaha put.
Yeah, thanks, Zachary. When we've seen that new V4 race in competitive action in Ricardo Fernandez in Misano and most recently Malaysia, the most startling observation is pretty easy to see if you look at the top speed charts there. They clearly are being ultra conservative in terms of how much power they feed into that new V4. Just looking now, the speed charts down, what is just under a 900 metre start finish right here. Augusto Fernandez once again through the speed guns. Is getting outgunned here at 324.34 kilometres. It's best from Fernandez so far in this morning session. Now that is 14k, just over 14k slower than Luke Marini's factory Honda. Relevant to some of the other Yamahas out on circuit. Well, Miguel Oliveira's one place ahead of Fernandez for speed traps, about 1.5k faster. So too is Fabio Quartararo. I must admit, I thought they'd start sort of putting a bit more horsepower in that engine now.
And I understand that they're, again, much like we were talking about with Honda earlier on, they're afraid of conflict. Well, I remember they had one when they ran the V4 in Misano on the Friday. We saw Augusto Fernandez pulling over at the side of the racetrack during SP1, so they don't want that kind of thing happening. But ultimately, this is a game, this is a sport where you've got to take risks. Conservatism doesn't often win you Grand Prix or win you World Championships. And Fabio Quartararo is going to want to see something tangible that gives him confidence that he can continue to put his faith long term in Yamaha going into 2027. He's going to have to make that decision at some point next season, and there's some chat we discussed this on Gear Up yesterday in terms of what Fabio Quartararo will do next season. If he makes a decision to stay with Yamaha in the first part of next season, he is purely guessing that they're going to get there with the V4 rather than actually knowing that they're going to get there. I guess any decision you make regarding wider contracts for 2027 is going to be a guess to a certain extent given the change in the regulations, but there's not an awful lot from the Yamaha point of view to fill Fabio Quartararo with an awful lot of confidence and hope. He is riding out of his skin at the moment on that inline 4, but he seems to be spending every single racing lap in 2025 defending his position, having qualified higher than the bike races along, and then gradually slipping back in a Grand Prix with a bike that just isn't quick enough.
Yamaha obviously were aware that this new V4 powered M1 was not going to be any kind of magic one fix. It was going to be no silver bullet. But if they've got any hopes and prayers of keeping Quartararo beyond 2026, they have to show him something that's a significant step forward in the early part of 2026. Otherwise, Fabio has made no bones about it, hasn't he? He said, well, I'll have to, for the sake of my career. You know, I've been patient. I've stuck with Yamaha since he made his debut in the MotoGP Championship back in 2019. You almost get the sense, maybe now it's just the right time for Fabio Quartararo to get a new challenge, a new adventure, maybe also move to a European team. He knows how Japanese factories work. He knows how the Japanese projects work. Maybe just go and try something completely different. I mean, there could be a big reshuffle. The grid couldn't there for 2027. And as Lewis mentioned, Pedro Costa talked about this because of course he's getting asked loads of questions about, but he's in the same boat. If KTM don't improve, what will Acosta decide to do in 2027? And as he talked about so much, well, it's a bit of a stab in the dark. You're taking a bit of a punt wherever you go in 2027 because of course the capacity gets reduced to 850cc engines, and perhaps more significantly, we move over to from Michelin to Pirelli tyres. I mean, who's going to come out the gate quickest on the new Pirelli rubber era?
Yamaha might feel that with what we gather might well be some increased front grip with the Pirelli that maybe will bring these things back forward. Then if they're looking for some positives, then we will do our best to find them. Gustav Fernandez has put in a 1:31.6 this morning. Gustav Fernandez is in 17th. He's 7/10 of a second off the pace of Alex Marquez at the moment. And with no disrespect intended to Gustav Fernandez, here he is on the V4 Yamaha. He's a Moto2 world champion. Of probably won here back in 2022. Got Fabio Quartararo on any motorcycle, you're generally going to find a 2 to 3 tenth minimum step forward. So the actual lap time that he's setting at the moment is not too shabby. Here he comes out of the final corner. This could bring him up to the top 10 if he completes this one. It's clearly lacking some top speed, but over the lap it's not too slow. Gustav Fernandez moves up one place with a loss of time in the final sector, but he's now within 6 tenths of the pace.
Quartararo will not care what they call that white RM1 next year. He won't care what colour it is, he just wants a fast bike. I mean, he keeps talking constantly about more grip, more power. That's what we need from the Iwata factory. As always, they're around this tight and 20 Valencia circuit. It means the lap times are very, very tight. Down from Alex Marquez's lead this session at 1:30.884. But not even a second covering the top 22 down to Nicola Buniga. Fair play to Jorge Martin. I mean, this is once again a bit of an exercise in blowing off some cobwebs. As Paolo Benora said, Jorge Martin has not touched anything two-wheel related since that crash in Motegi. The only two-wheeled action Martin's had since Japan has been riding around this Valencia paddock on his scooter. We know Maverick Vinales has been riding 600 and 1000cc production bikes to get himself ready. Well, Martin blowing some cobwebs off. He's only just over a second off top spot. Just before we head back down to Jack, a little bit of breaking news emerged yesterday. It's good news if you're a Thai Grand Prix fan, because it's confirmed that we'll be returning to the Chang International Stadium Buriram until at least 2031 once again. Thailand will be our host venue for a much anticipated season opener 2026. Let's go back down to Jack.
Yeah, a bit of a small issue, not exactly the perfect start to life for Pecco Bagnaia, which probably explains why he's outside the top 15 at the moment. The first bike just had a small bit of smoke puffing out around the fuel tank, which is the reason why they marked that one up. And then the second one, when they went to start it seemed as though there might have been some kind of issue. They've had the side bearings off, and it looked as though they were working on the flux there. So both bikes at the moment are needing some repair work. Bagnaia in the back of the box with helmet and gloves on, ready to go. But unfortunately, neither of his motorcycles are. So not the perfect start for Bagnaia here as well.
Thanks very much, Jack. One rider I don't can wait to see the back end of 2025 is going to be Pecco Bagnaia. I just pressed a few months ago the lap times, and now there was less than a second covering the top 22. Well, there's not even half a second splitting the top 12 down from Alex Marquez to Brad Binder, who we saw take that early tumble at turn 8. Alex Marquez and Morbidelli at the moment, the only two riders that have found laps in the 130s. Frankie Morbidelli, I think, on notice once again. I believe he was called up to speak to the FIA factory yesterday just for a little chat about his over-aggression on the first lap at turn 5 in Portimao last weekend. Actually, on Frank, it's good to see him fit here this weekend, because when you saw that contact with Enea Bastianini, he had a real nasty whack on his left shoulder and a big bump on his head. Frank Atkinson was able to conduct any post-race in Portimao. He did have to go to a local hospital for cautionary CT scans, all given the A-OK. Morbidelli at the moment up in CT2.
One thing we do know is Frank Morbidelli knows exactly the best way to ride a Ducati GP24. He's now done 2 full seasons on it. Having started last year on the GP24, stuck with it for this season, having moved across to the VR46, the sole factory spec bike. Current spec bike has been given to his teammate Fabio Gianantonio, so Frank Morbidelli will have a change of machinery for next season. He'll go on to the GP25, which has had mixed reviews this season, depending on which of the riders you speak to. Pecco Bagnaia certainly one of these stands to see the back of it. Marc Marquez, of course, has got plenty of winning on it.
Play the Jorge Martin, haven't seen one of the sprint in Japan. Straight back into the groove, a 1:31.923 from Martin. mentioned, just over a second he is back right now of Alex Marquez. If you compare it to his teammate Marco Bezzecchi, well, it's just half a second. It just shows how quickly he slipped back into race mode. Jorge Martin. We did see, though, when he was leaving pit lane for one of his stints in this session, just grabbing and manoeuvring to that right shoulder. This will be a pretty uncomfortable weekend as far as Martin is concerned. I suppose of all the places to come back to, Valencia not too bad, only 5 right-handers for him to contend with. That's confirming Alex Marquez is looking to play on his 2025 Ducati Aero.
Quattraro now makes his way towards the line. 9 comes ecstasy now with his 3/10 on the pace. The Yamaha in the session at the moment is Ducati's 1, 2 and 3, and Honda's 4 and 5, with Johan Zarco ahead of our wildcard Aleix Spargo, showing that he still has plenty to offer. He's been testing all over the world this season, and most recently he's been testing at Sepang, and of course at Aragon. He now gets to play in Valencia at the moment. He's just 3,000 per second away from being the top Honda this morning.
Yeah, the entire MotoGP field, unless Marc Marquez unfortunately, will be testing here on Tuesday, as we mentioned, fairly repeatedly over the last few weeks, because he wants to join us for the first action of 2026. Yamaha also actually, I guess it shows how desperate they are to get some key mileage on this P4. They've privately rented the Valencia circuit for some Wednesday testing as well. So all the Yamahas will be here for both Tuesday and Wednesday. We will be here on Tuesday, myself, Lewis, Jack and Elliot York. But by the time the Yamaha take the circuit on Wednesday morning, we will be long gone and ready for our Christmas break.
Yeah, we'll be hibernating until the beginning of February, when myself, Jack and Elliot are heading over to Sepang to bring you some coverage of pre-season testing in Malaysia in February. Of course, Yamaha point two, they could be the one remaining manufacturer with the tests available to them if Honda do get the required results this weekend. Of course, pre-season testing, we have a test in Sepang, as it's always the case in February. Preceding that is the shakedown test. We think Honda, who scored 9 points with their lead rider this weekend, will be available to the rookies, Diogo Moreira and Toprak Gasioglu, test riders, and the other Yamaha race riders. Of course, Toprak already eligible. Quattraro, Rinton Miller could also be eligible to take part in that shakedown test. And of course, we also test in Buriram the weekend before the first Grand Prix of next season, which is at the very end, the very start of February, March next season. Weekend before that, we go testing in Buriram on the Saturday and Sunday before we all get underway again. So 22 more rounds of this MotoGP World Championship.
Guess what? Guess the top KTM once again here in Valencia. It is, of course, Pedro Acosta, still in with a shout of 4th place in the World Championship. Wasn't that long ago, he was almost 80 points, 4 or 5 Grand Prix ago, he was 80 points behind Bagnaia in the title chase. That's the beautiful shot that we always love to see here in Valencia. Power slide in the KTM through turn 13. He really has hit some top form of late, hasn't he? Acosta 4 sprint podiums in the last 5, 3 Grand Prix podiums in the last 4. Now there's no bias in this commentary box, but I would love actually to see Pedro Acosta win this Grand Prix on Sunday, because apparently he's been having a little bit of a chat with Danny Pedrosa. He's been leaning on Pedrosa's experience, knowledge for a bit of advice, much more he said in 2025, and apparently it's emerged that Danny Pedrosa said to Pedro Acosta, if he wins the final Grand Prix here in Valencia, he's going to have to dye his hair orange KTM. So for that reason alone, I really want Pedro Acosta to win here in Valencia.
Yeah, we don't advocate race fixing, but if we did, that might be a reason to bring it in. If there's a Grand Prix, to be fair, where Pedro Acosta could pull that off, he needs to qualify well. This is the kind of circuit where overtaking is fiercely difficult. It is a tight, twisty circuit. There is only really one long straight to speak of. We know how good KTM is when it goes in a straight line. So, yeah, Pedro Acosta can qualify in the front row, which he finally did for the first time of the 2025 season in Portimao, as Jack Miller launches himself to the top. Would simply assume that he puts the pressure over it to put in a 1:33.82. So maybe, just maybe, Pedro Acosta can pull it off. If he does, he would have pulled the 7th consecutive interim winner at the end of his 2025 season. Incredible.
It is worth noting as well that this is KTM's most successful Grand Prix circuit in terms of podiums. They've had 5 previous podium finishes here previously, including their first ever one, thanks to Paul Espargaro in what was incredibly wet 2018 Valencia Grand Prix. Let's go back down to Jack for an additional Yamaha update.
Yeah, we've spoken already about one of the high-profile changes when it comes to riding crew chiefs next year with Phil Barrett. Well, the other one is the move of Alberto Giuribiola to become top track Gatli Oglu's crew chief in 2026. And quite interestingly, quite comically as well, down in Augusto Fernandez box, obviously Andrea Dovizioso is in there helping out, of course, as part of his role as Yamaha test rider and trying to bring the project forward with Albi stood right next to him as the pair go side by side and begin to work together again for the first time since, of course, that very successful partnership that they had. Victor Cassi when Dobby was the man straight into the fight to Marc Marquez. So good to see the pair of them back working together, this time not in red, but in blue.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jack. I'm not sure those sentiments will be echoed by Enea Bastianini, of course, who, when he became aware that Giuribiola was moving on to 2026, I mean, there was a very abrupt ending to their relationship at KTM. Unfortunately, I hate even saying this, but Enea's had more crew chiefs podiums in 2025. And yet, of course, it is a mouth-watering prospect. We do so really hope you'll be with us for over 6 hours of live coverage at the test here on Tuesday. A lot of interest in Diogo Moreira's move up to LCR Honda, most likely as our new Moto2 world champion. He's 24 points clear of Manu Gonzalez in that decent battle with just one round remaining. But I think everybody cannot wait to see the public debut of Turk, top rack Gatli Oglu, the box office star of World Superbike for so many years, a three-time hat-trick of successive World Superbike titles for Gatli Oglu. In our headset, somebody's crashed here. Somebody has gone down the road here late on in Valencia. Just another 5 minutes of this FP1 sector running. Confirming Aldeguer.
He's in turn 8 again. We've seen the marshals running outside of our commentator window. We've already seen one crash down there on GP, and Confirming Aldeguer, that bike's made it all the way to the tyre barrier.
Count your motoring through there, through 7. You're up to 50 at about 250 kilometres an hour. It's actually in the infield section. Here, this is going to be turn 4. Tucks the front then going through turn 4 to Aldeguer and went really late, didn't it? Maybe he just was back on the power there and just took a bit of weight off that front end, and Aldeguer then, yeah, let's have a listen.
Power back in, didn't he?
Yeah, because I said it was that he picked up the throttle, that just took that little bit of weight off the front end, and Aldeguer goes down. Of course, it was in that turn 4 here in 2023, and we had the collision with Jorge Martin and Marc Marquez, which didn't really play decisive in the outcome of the championship, but he certainly made his life a little bit more comfortable for Pascal Bankian in that final Grand Prix of 2023.
But earlier on in the session, when we saw that tyre temperature graphic with Pedro Acosta, see, that was called demonstrating the rear tyre, but the same is applying to the front tyre. The temperature in the right-hand side does drop a little bit, of course, when you're on the left-hand side of the tyre through turns 13, 14, 1, 2 and 3, before you're back on the right-hand side for turn 4, which is why that corner is so problematic.
Yeah, there's not a Grand Prix rider on planet Earth that has not had a front-end crash going through turn 4 here in Valencia, particularly in the cooler morning sessions. After we pick up Aleix Espargaro and picked him up at a good time, he's got second as the HRC test rider, 130.707. Backwards again as he's gone in with a special helmet design. This is all a tribute to his wife, Laura, who was always the companion for the 36-year-old. This will be Grand Prix start number 344 for Aleix Espargaro. So yeah, just a thank you to his wife, Laura, for many years of support, being at Aleix's side, of course, from the twins, Max and Mia. Not very popular on Aleix's social media channels, if you do follow them at home. Max and Mia get as much airtime as what Aleix does on their social media these days.
Yeah, his extensive car collection too on social media. I'm sure that's caught the attention of a few of you. Certainly the envy of many of us in this Grand Prix paddock. Mr. Fernandez, fellow wild card, is in 18th place at the moment. So Miller, Espargaro and Raul Fernandez have all made late improvements. So certainly saw from Miller, he was on brand new medium front and rear. Raul Fernandez, as you can now see following the screen, is on a brand new medium rear tyre a used soft front tyre, and Alex Spargo also with some fresh rubber to put himself up into second place. The fastest rider before those late injections of pace and some fresh rubber was Alex Marquez on a 1:30.884. He's now back to fourth.
Good little pick-me-up after his Portimao injury dramas. This for Ralph Fernandez at the moment on course for third place. He's also in the high 130. 17 laps completed in the session for Fernandez. He said yesterday he's pretty much 95% full strength after the real scary crash that he had down the hill into turn 2 in Portimao. He said it was one of the biggest crashes of his Grand Prix career. He's had a few when you think about some of the big ones in pre-season testing of late in Mandalika and in Japan. But he's up there inside the top 3. Check on some other big names. Pecco Bagnaia, who Jack reported was having a bit of a tough old start to a tough 2025 in general. Bagnaia's best work this morning a 1:31.528. That's left him down in 20th position. But Bagnaia, as always, doing a lot of work on worn tyres. His best time coming on lap 5 of 16.
I'm sure it doesn't take much in 2025 to make Pecco Bagnaia fans panic the way his season has gone, but I don't think I'll be panicking at this stage with Bagnaia down the order. Igor has run to the top of the order. He's also put in some fresh rubber and he now climbs up to third, but it's now third and fourth for the Trackhouse duo.
Good ride last weekend in Portugal from Iagura. It was a very good ride actually. I'm doing the service to him. It was a 7th place, 8th top 10 finish of the year. So he's just been a little bit too long trying to find a way through on Gian Zarco, who was very resilient on that LCR Honda. He said had he maybe got through on Zarco 3 or 4 laps earlier, then there may have been something for him late on the Hyundai Fabio Quartararo. Couldn't pick off both Frenchmen late on in Portimao, but another very, very solid performance from Iagura. Pick up Martin, negotiating his way through turn 6. He will be finishing most likely this session in last place, but positions immaterial, aren't they, right now for Jorge Martin? This is just about sleep time. There's been such a lack of in 2025. Just a confidence building mission this weekend and that Tuesday test. To be fair to him, high 131's a very respectable pace, given we haven't seen him since Saturday of Japan.
This is his 18th lap of the morning, and it might well be his fastest, as you can see on screen. He did jog yesterday, given the double lockdown it was on this weekend. He might not even bother doing any time attack this weekend. He should certainly treat this as a public test session. I'm sure Martin will have a go at a time attack, because that's been one of the areas on the Aprilia that has taken him the longest to truly get on top of. He's often seen him coming from low qualifying positions to pretty good race results. In the last one of the teams, as Igor climbs another place, takes second from Alex Spargo on his last lap of the session down to a 1:30.705. So it's Pramac, Yamaha, Trackhouse Aprilia, Honda Test Rider, and Trackhouse Aprilia, your top 4. So putting up please Alberto Pucci, Honda in the top 3.
Yeah, good job by Alex Spargo. Hardly a novice, so that's it. Ricardo Tormo circuit. This is his 21st Grand Prix start here in Valencia. He had been higher than 7th though in the previous 20, not a particularly happy hunting ground as far as the veteran Spaniard is concerned. Just taking to the perimeter road on the outside of turn 8 is Maverick Vinales. Vinales ending that session in 9th place. He did 18 laps, so our returning walking wounded top-notch Spaniards, Vinales and Martin, both did 18 laps across that session. Okay, Bagnaia, not exactly confident and happy march to the back of the factory Ducati garage. 21st, Bagnaia, and FP1 here in Valencia.
Well, Marco Bezzecchi himself, the other rider, who of course is in that battle for third in the World Championship this weekend. Bezzecchi was only 18th himself in that session. Of course, he didn't entertain fresh rubber on the Factory Aprilia at the end of the morning. 1:31.364. Jack Miller, who's going to be one half of perhaps the entertaining teammate pairing for 2026 when he's partnered by World Superbike champion cross-track captain Miller. Fastest, giving something for Yamaha to smile about on this Friday morning in Valencia.
That was only last weekend, and my memory is absolutely shocking. But did Jack lead away in FP1 in Portimao? Was it Friday afternoon? I mean, I know it's only 7 days ago, folks, but I'm getting old, and it's been the longest season in Grand Prix history. Oh, well, there's still a little bit of the old grey matter that works, but I'll take it. Better than it is, at least 1:30.382. Less than a second, eventually ended the covering the top 18. What is always super tight sessions here in Valencia. Not a bad job at all by Vignales, just over a second adrift on Miller at the end. The late Spider then inside the top three. Of course, we're going to get the customary practice start session coming up next. Late's really good in sectors 1, 2 and 3. Look how much he struck. Sector 4 is clearly the area where Honda have got to identify some progress. Long corners, once again, is still around some of those sweeping long sections, which Ramir was talking about here yesterday, where the Honda still does suffer. So perfect illustration there in that final section, which does include that long, tight sliding turn 13. A later Spyro was giving up a quarter of a second in that third split.
Also, sorry to bring number 3 as well.
No,
it was third. Last weekend, he was awfully close in fairness to him. But I think he entertained us, if nothing else, with his jump over the turn 8 crest. But looking at Alex Marquez and Marco Bezzecchi with a 1 and 2 in FP1 last weekend.
Damn you, Alex Marquez. Marco Bezzecchi. Oh well.
Close enough.
I thought the grey matter that I thought was working. It's not. Hey ho.
Well, it's far wrong.
Hey, yeah, I was close. I was close. Only 2 places.
Yeah, he won it on style points in the end with his jump over turn 8. And Jadwal does end this morning. P1, one of the other Yamahas in that morning session. Augusto Fernandez on the 54 version 10. Fabio Quartararo 14th. And of course, Miguel Oliveira is farewell full-time for MotoGP here this weekend. He was 22nd. Alex Rins 15th and leading in now leading pit lane. So much emotion for Miguel Oliveira last weekend. Before the Grand Prix even got underway, he was already in tears. Of course, with the ceremony involving his family before the national anthem was performed, which certainly did tug at the heartstrings of Miguel Oliveira and us watching from the commentary box. This will be the full-time ride of his 117th and final MotoGP appearance for Miguel.
Yeah, he said last weekend it was like a 100-kilo weight lifted off his shoulders when he took the checkered flag. After all the stress, all the pressure of the build-up to his final home Grand Prix, and then dealing with all the extra attention that Algarve International Circuit classes. This weekend it'll be like a walk in the park as we wish Miguel Oliveira and Somkat Chantra well and all the success in their new adventure over in the World Superbike paddock next year. So the practice start session and about to commence here in Valencia. Right, that's by Raul Fernandez for Frankie Morbidelli's 5th. They beat themselves up pretty badly in that Grand Prix last weekend. Well, of course, it's going to be an incredibly emotional weekend down in Red Bull KTM Tech 3 because after, 4 decades in the paddock, stepping aside and handing over the reins to Gunther Steiner in 2026 will be the boss. Hervé Montiel. Won't be a dry eye in the house here on Sunday, will there? Let's get some early weekend thoughts from the Tech 3 team manager, Nico Goyon, who joins Jack.
Yeah, of course, we've welcoming back Maverick this weekend. First session done. Nico, how was Maverick? How was he feeling?
Well, the feeling out of the first run was a little bit strange. Everything felt a bit strange. The position then we made some really small adjustments, almost nothing, and but step by step he was getting more and more comfortable. We tried to stay steady with the bike, and he will come back.
As the guy said, it's going to be a special weekend, an emotional one. What is the mood within the box like ahead of it, knowing that I'm sure there will be some tears shed on Sunday?
Probably I cannot mention that, but yeah, for sure. But you can imagine when you spend most of your time in this paddock, and at the moment everything will be down, will be off, probably the heart will be so we can easily understand that it might be.
Hopefully it's a good weekend for all of you guys.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, let's hope Tech 3 and Hervé Ponchal have a better weekend than Pedro Acosta's practice start there, because that was a real mess. As you can see, Fermin Aldeguer is looking on an onlooker from pit wall. Aldeguer was on the floor late on in turn 8, destroying his number 1 bike, and the number 2 bike's not quite ready, or they just imagine the problem the bike's not ready. Otherwise he'd be out in this session more than likely. Aldeguer finished in 11th place, finishing in the gravel as well at turn 8.
Hero there watching on from the pit wall. We expected to be a busy man on Tuesday as well. Called upon Buliger in that session. He was 23rd. 1.3 off the pace as we have a look here at the practice driver Pecco Bagnaia, which wasn't particularly great either. Pedro Acosta following suit.
Yeah, that's almost like he didn't have everything fully engaged, the front wheel lifted up in the air. Thomas Vargro then, KTM test rider. He's been a real key ally, hasn't he, both on and off the track. As far as Pedro Acosta is concerned, he knows, of course, Thomas Vargro don't expect anybody just the brilliant performances of late of Acosta. Well, an unwanted spectator at the end of this practice start session, but at least he's going to get an insight into who might be beaten on that long run down the first corner. And look to Jorge Martin powering the factory Aprilia away from the start line.
Well, he was obviously close to the pit wall there. I don't know how he ended up over on that side of the racetrack. I think we might be about to see it.
Yeah. Do you want your fringe trimming here, Fermin? As his front tyre dropped back on the ground. Big puff of smoke there.
If anyone doesn't need that kind of scare at this stage, it's Jorge Martin, the East dad.
Yeah. The only goal they have this weekend is just to make Fermin Aldeguer. Yeah, also a little bit of a nod of approval there. From the Champion. Have a good look at Pedro Acosta. Is it going to be taken to much better as far as Acosta is concerned? It certainly is. That's more like it. That seemed like everything was in the full working order. I'm quite sure he got the whole shot device engaged there. They saw that the front wheel just popped straight up in the air. Not quite as dramatic and as severe as Somkiat Chantra's wheelie coming out the final corner over the crest in Portimao last weekend. Tell you what, the same Mammoth Vinales has not had much seat time on that KTM Tech 3 machine. Brilliant practice start from Vinales.
And Fabio Quartararo, who I don't think is tempting fate here by pulling onto pole position as the Yamaha 6 closer to the ground, all about getting the best possible launch away. Crawls all over that M1 to keep himself as low as possible. And a pretty good launch too from the number 20. I know you, of course, you're practicing the start there, but you're practicing where you're going to brake for the first corner, the turn 1, which is often trouble. You scrub off speed down from just over 200 miles an hour down to around 80 miles an hour for turn 1.
Miller back in then after what's been a very successful start to our season finale here in Valencia as far as Pramac Yamaha are concerned. Of course, it was 12 months ago when it was Pramac Ducati when they had the best day or the best weekend of their existence. Round over at the circuit of Barcelona, Catholic Jorge Martin was crowned our 2024 World Champion. Could not have foreseen all the troubles, all the trials and tribulations that were going to come his way in 2025 as he moved over to the factory Aprilia team. Spot on, beautiful start that from Alex Marquez, who just keeps racking up the podiums. Only the 29-year-old Spaniard. We knew in Japan he was securing second place in the World Championship. 12 Grand Prix podiums now, the two fab. Weekend, second place in the Portuguese Grand Prix was his 19th runner-up spot in 2025.
So also there, so they need to practice start. I know every rider has their own various procedure, their own way of going about a start in MotoGP. Alex Marquez stays up very late, doesn't he, and then drops below the bubble of his Ducati when the red lights come on, and then obviously launches immediately one way. I believe he just does the start, I guess, but some riders they like to come to the grid very early before they make their start. Fabio Quartararo, we've often seen in 2025, he likes to want the last to the grid, so he doesn't allow his higher temperature and brake temperature to drop before he eventually goes off the line.
Acosta, steady rather than spectacular in that session. He has been spectacular of late, hasn't he, on the factory KTM. He was the last of the 8 riders in the 130. This morning he just crept into that 130 barrier by a couple of thousandths of a second. Acosta ending the session in 8th place. And once again, as he has been soft this year. seated on a fresh set of medium Michelin rubber. Got to make it work, got to make it pay, and Jack certainly did the business. A 1:30.382 saw him take the spoils here in Valencia in FP1, a delayed FP1, just over 0.3 of a second clear of Agura in second. And while the old fox of a late Spargo, a season campaigner here in Valencia, top 3 on the development RC213B Honda. Two-track outfit pretty is inside the top 4 with Ricardo Fernandez in 4th spot.
But it is Jack Miller who ends the final FP1 of the season. Quickest overall, Igor Ellis, Spargo and Ralph Fernandez next up. Frankie Morbidelli fifth ahead of Alex Marquez, who was the fastest rider not to change tyres late on. Blandy a 7th place in the Grand Prix would see them lose some of the second set. Pedro Costa 8th ahead of San Antonio and Augusto Fernandez top 10 on the V4 Yamaha. Aldegar next up from Marini Zarco, Quattuaro Rins and Binder. And they have Bastianini 17th ahead of Marco Bezzecchi, Portimao winner. Maverick Vinales returning to action with 19th. Then a Tomcat Chantra, Pecco Bagnaia, who had some problems in the box, went in 21st ahead of Miguel Oliveira and Nicola Budiga, and the returning world champion Jorge Martin.
Yeah, impressive return that as far as Jorge Martin is concerned. A 1:31.923 is the best work over 18 laps in that morning session. Another returning as well, Maverick Vinales doing well. 19th place. Miller then starting the session on the soft front medium rear tyre, and then when he switched late on medium combination, with 7 lap run, he found a 1:30.382 to lead the way.
Medium initially for Agura. He put a soft front tyre in the end, as well as a second new medium rear to take second.
Alex Spargo also on his 3rd and final run of the session went on to fresh rubber, and he made it work at 1:30.707, a late top 3.
And Ralph Fernandez didn't change front tyre, well not on the final one, he did on front 2. Brand new medium rear for run 3, got him down into the 1:30s to take P4.
What about our second time? Agura absolutely nailing that first section with that fresh rubber, over 1/10 of a second clear of Miller and Mia.
Yamaha Aprilia Honda in sector 2 with Miller fastest through there.
Honda looking good in sector 3 on that tight infield section. Alex Spargo just a whisker ahead of Miller, and Augusto Fernandez on the new Yamaha V4.
And Jack Miller fastest in the final sector, the only sector which features a Ducati rider in the top 3.
So we're underway then in our final showdown of the 2025 MotoGP World Championship. After the 2026 start here in Valencia on Tuesday, with opening his account here on free practice 1 on Friday morning. Pre-comeback Yamaha star Jack Miller leading the field away. He tops our final Friday morning stroke afternoon action of 2025.
The world's most fearless riders, the fastest runners, the most forward-thinking manufacturers. This is the hunt, the next one. We ride to the edge of possibility. Our riders and machines are always first on the throttle, last on the brakes. The riders, athletes with hunter mentality, at the peak of physical fitness, talent and skill, and always calculating their next move. The manufacturers, creators of the most advanced bikes on the planet, capable of 360 kilometers per hour, purpose-built for MotoGP, pioneering engineering, breaking extreme acceleration, ultimate precision, and absolute performance. Unrideable to mere mortals, tamed only by our riders. We ride to the edge of the sea, more overtakes, and forward drift. The rear wheel drifts, the fastest laps, the rain shadow, the fluffy underbelly, circuit holidayers, the day trippers, the Sunday sofa viewers, the ones we've known forever and the ones we haven't met yet.
Alex Marquez once again. What a showstopper that was. And the best advert you'll see from MotoGP. Alex will win a classic sprint here in Portimao. Absolutely sensational. From pole position, race action way in MotoGP. It's lights out. And we're racing in MotoGP here in the Grand Prix of Portugal. Nearly down because they've almost only got it all out of shape on the brakes going in. Turn 5, so Frankie down out at 5 on lap 1.